Tonight on Reel to Reel, we examine the issue of religion and politics from voter registration in the South
to a discussion with local guests in our studio.
Hi, I'm Father Dave McGowan.
And I'm Isabel Gauvry-LaGrosse. Welcome to this edition of Reel to Reel.
Welcome back to Reel to Reel. The current presidential debate is unique in several ways, but one of the most prominent features of this presidential campaign is the unique role that religion is playing in it.
Later this evening, we'll discuss religion and politics with guests here in our studio. We'll meet with three people with varying perspectives on the subject.
Joining us will be an auxiliary bishop from Philadelphia, an attorney who specializes in constitutional law, a Villanova professor of political science, and they'll be telling us what the bishops really mean when they issue a pastoral letter, what the separation of church and state is all about, and what the history of religion and politics has been.
But first, we'll travel to the South to see just how involved some churches are in the voter registration process.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Reagan.
North Carolina's conservative Republican Senator Jesse Helms is pulling out all the stops to protect his Senate seat from the challenge of progressive Democratic Governor James Hunt.
We'll do it here. Okay. Thank you.
The contest is a close and bitter fight.
Dr. Falwell termed this the decade of destiny. Well, in 80...
Jerry Falwell's moral majority is headed in North Carolina by Baptist minister Lamar Mooneyham. He leads their statewide drive to register voters sympathetic to new right causes. In this, the 10th largest state, the size and makeup of the voter turnout will directly affect the presidential race.
But from the conservative point of view, we were ordering new leadership. And I think we turned the system a few degrees to the right. That was in 80. 84 is absolutely imperative to finishing the job that was started there, because it's a presidential election and also in this state a very crucial senatorial election. Primarily, the local churches are our targets because we're finding a large number of church-going people unregistered. It's a very fertile area. Occasionally, we will be confronted with a pastor or a church person who has been, in my opinion, sold a myth. The myth being politics and religion don't mix.
Although a fundamentalist, Mooneyham's point can be well taken by everyone, including Catholics.
But our people have bought it. Many church-going people of various denominations have bought it. And no self-respecting Christian would be engaged in anything political. That is a myth. When you carry that to its logical conclusion, you must agree that only atheists are qualified to participate.
You got the registrars here, and I need not try to emphasize at this point how important this is. So please, if you're not registered or your friend may not be registered, you can register, and I tell you, it's absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary. That's one reason.
North Carolina is Southern Baptist country. Here at Union Baptist Church in Durham, the minister, Dr. Davis, does his share of mixing religion and politics. He sees it as a matter of moral responsibility.
We can have par excellence. Be educated and highly intellectual, but unless we have a moral responsibility, get these 18-year-olds registered. And I'm saying right now, and I mean it, and I've been saying it, I think if you're going to belong to the church, you ought to be able to vote. Get your name on the roll book in the church, get your name on the roll book in the courthouse, and then get your name on the roll book in heaven and use that later on. But use your name and your power.
Churches across North Carolina, black and white, use Sunday for voter registration. The right to vote belongs to everyone, educated or uneducated, poor or wealthy.
They can take your home, your money, your land, and everything else, but as far as that right, that's one right every citizen in this country has, and that's to vote, to register to vote.
Well, I think that it's very important for persons to get out to register and vote, specifically our young people.
Jesse Jackson has come to North Carolina as part of his campaign to register people, especially young adults.
There's a certain target group that we have found that the higher percentage of non-registered voters. And usually that is among the young people, young adults, and we concentrate very heavily on the young adults.
John Edwards of the Voter Education Project, a national group based in Atlanta, holds a workshop for volunteers.
So once you begin to want to make those changes here, in our workshops, we tell people to emphasize the local issues, problems that people are concerned about, what's happening at the town hall, at the courthouse, in their neighborhood.
And we need to get a commitment. I am sick and tired of, like you say, voting for people just because they're Democrats and just because they're going to run for office and we are Democrats.
Getting blacks onto the voter rolls brings about change in two ways. It helps elect blacks to office, and it changes the attitude of white politicians.
There has been a great difference and great change when you have someone elected. But the most important thing is changing the attitudes of the whites. Many of the whites have changed, have good religion. An example of it is Governor Wallace. He has blacks all over his cabinet now. Maybe not enough, but he have them. And it's the same man a few years ago would not even shake a hand of a black. So you see, the voting power has brought about this change.
My name is Doris, and I'm conducting a voter registration drive. We're trying to reach everybody, but I think our primary aim is the low-income people, people who are not going to come out on their own. You've got to go in and sort of motivate these people.
Doris Glenn spends many hours going door to door in poor neighborhoods, such as this public housing project.
Don't forget about the May 8th elections. Go to your regular precinct.
She has been a registrar for 8 years and has seen changes in the Board of Elections policies.
At one point in time, we could not come out into an area like this to register people. We had to only have those people who wanted to be registered to come to our homes, or they had to set up special registration drives where we had to get permissions from the Board of Elections to conduct these drives. So now they have lifted all restrictions. As long as the potential voter shows us proper identification, we can go in and every place as long as it's in the county of Durham.
In 1980, President Reagan carried North Carolina by less than 40,000 votes. Meanwhile, the state has 500,000 unregistered blacks. And out of every 100 blacks here who register and cast ballots, the Democrats can expect 96 votes.
Now, we'll say you will never have to do this again as long as you vote at least once every year. And
in 1980, there were 16 states where 5 percentage points or less separated Reagan and Carter.
Republican or Democrat.
Most of these 16 states are targets of voter registration drives.
Just DEM is fine.
Okay.
I'm very happy with what I'm doing. I think that I'm making a big impact on politics. I think we're getting a lot of people who normally would not be involved. And I just think I'm doing something good.
Doris Glenn feels good about her voter registration efforts. Lamar Mooneyham sees his registration work as part of his Christian commitment. And so does Dr. Davis. John Edwards puts it best.
I see that citizen participating in voter registration has been a Christian act, because if we do not get Christians as elected officials, as decision makers, then we're left. If we do not have people who will be more concerned about humans and bread and butter than bullets, then it'll be the Christians' fault because we didn't speak out. And I guess we said to people, if you do not, who will? If Christians do not take the leadership, we always asked, who will?
When we return, we'll meet our guests and continue our discussion of religion and politics. So stay with us. In 1960, candidate John Kennedy was asked how his religion would affect his performance as president. The young candidate silenced his questioners by saying he would keep his religion separate from his politics. In 1976, President Jimmy Carter claimed to be a born-again Christian and said that he sometimes sought spiritual guidance in matters of state. In 1984, the issue of religion and politics has a new meaning and intensity, as church leaders of many denominations and politicians of every persuasion raised the question from both the pulpit and the campaign bandwagon. Unlike past years, when a candidate's religious affiliation was the main question, the issue in 1984 is more complicated. Just how much should a person's moral and religious beliefs affect his political choice? And to what extent should church leaders become involved in politics? One of the first to address the issue publicly was Archbishop John O'Connor of New York, who claimed that Democratic vice presidential candidate Geraldine Ferraro could not be personally opposed to abortion while publicly supporting it. More recently, John Cardinal Crowell entered the debate when he released a pastoral letter asserting the Christian right and responsibility to participate in the political process.
We must stand up and use the democratic process to restore legal protection to our inalienable and God-given rights.
A complicated issue with strong statements from each side. In an effort to clarify this issue for those of you who will be going to vote next week, we're going to spend this evening's Crosstalk segment discussing religion and politics with Father McGowan and our special guests.
Thank you, Bill. Welcome to this evening's segment of Crosstalk. This evening we have three distinguished guests with us, and I'd like to introduce them to you. First, we have Bishop Francis Schulte, Auxiliary Bishop of Philadelphia. Next to Bishop Schulte, we have Mr. Herbert Keene, who's in private practice as a lawyer in Philadelphia. And next to Mr. Keene, we have Dr. Jack Schrem, who's a political science professor at Villanova University. Welcome, gentlemen. We're happy to have you here this evening. Bishop Schulte, perhaps we could begin with you this evening. We notice in the newspapers on any given morning that we might find a statement on the issues of this campaign by a politician or by a clergyman. Just what are the bishops telling the people?
Father, the responsibility of a bishop is to teach his people as authentically and as completely as possible, particularly on moral issues. There are several very important moral issues being debated in the American political process this year, and the bishops are trying to express themselves forthrightly on these human rights issues. A very important one, of course, is the right to life of the unborn. There are those who might try to turn this into simply a religious issue, a matter of Christian belief in the Trinity, or a matter of church practice like fast or abstinence. We're talking about a human life matter, a matter of civil rights, a matter of constitutional protection. And we're teaching that, but we're not instructing people as to how to vote. That's not the bishop's business. The citizen must then form his or her conscience and determine how he or she is going to vote.
Bishop, does there appear in your mind to be a balance in terms of the questions that are being addressed? Are all the moral issues being covered?
The National Conference of Catholic Bishops has issued a series of statements on a broad spectrum of issues at debate in this election. It has also established a priority among those issues. Those which concern the protection of human life are of overwhelming importance. So the bishops are very forthright in their condemnation of the taking of direct taking of innocent human life in a nuclear exchange. They see this very similar evil in the taking of human life of the unborn. These are human rights issues, and they are not primarily religious issues.
Mr. Keene, from your perspective as a lawyer, does there appear to be in your mind a blurring of the distinction between politics and religion in this campaign?
Father, I don't think that there is really a blurring of the distinction. I think that the public press has addressed the issues in such a fashion that the abortion issue in particular has been dressed up as a Roman Catholic issue. But I think if you look back over the last several campaigns, and perhaps even beyond that in this country, there have always been issues involving the moral area as well as pure politics. So while it may be popularly perceived as a blurring, I don't really think that there is a blurring. I think that we have to keep in mind that there is a distinction between a pure religious precept and, on the other hand, a human rights issue or a moral issue, such as the abortion issue.
Dr. Shem, your background as a political scientist might give us some insight on the relationship of the politics and religion issue now as opposed to the past. Are we seeing something new now?
Father, I don't believe that we're seeing something new. Religion and politics have been joined in the past. In 1976, when Jimmy Carter ran as a candidate, one dimension of his campaign was his position as a born-again Christian. I don't think anyone objected to that. It was a heightening of our sensitivity to religion. Back in the 1960s, religion and politics, in a sense, were joined in the civil rights movement and in the anti-war movement. There wasn't any objection to that. We've had other instances in which religion and politics have joined together in campaigns, but I think we should also focus on campaigns or elections when it might have been, but it was not. In 1968 and in 1972, we had Catholic vice presidential candidates, and there was not this discussion. And so I think we have to look at the particular issues of this campaign, and as Bishop Schulte and Herb Keene have said, what we have this time is this sensitivity to the human rights issue and the attention to it that has somehow been distracted by the discussion of religion.
If we have had religion in the past and we've had Catholic candidates in the past, why in 1984 has it come to the forefront of the campaign in such a forceful way?
I think the issue of abortion is one which is so profoundly moral and so profoundly disturbing to many people that it's simply inevitable that this would become a significant factor at the present time. Candidates have been asked their position on this. There's been an ongoing debate in the country about it. There are those who will simply try to make it into a religious, a sectarian issue of some sort, and others of us who are convinced that this is whether or not the Constitution should protect the unborn is a profoundly important civil rights issue. So I don't think it could be avoided.
Mm-hmm. Not only does this issue seem to come to the forefront, it also appears that we have a different style of campaigning this year. Reverend Jesse Jackson ran almost his entire primary campaign going from pulpit to pulpit in Baptist churches. Is there a precedent for this kind of campaigning?
I could answer that, Father. In the political science sense that we're aware that in the past, it's not new this year, but in the past, black ministers in the black church has been a very essential part of politics in the black communities. It's existed for many years, and I don't believe that Jesse Jackson's campaign raises a particular problem in that regard. I think we should consider the fact that local politics, it's not particularly new. We can look all in our local area here and throughout the country where individuals who are ministers with other churches have been active in public life. I remember, again, I mentioned before the 1960s. I think we all remember William Sloane Coughlin and his activities at that time. We can call to other politicians who have sort of taken off in their career from their ministerial base.
Is it proper for a minister who is also a politician to be running a campaign from his pulpit?
Father, I would say to you, I think that there's a huge difference between what Reverend Jackson was engaged in and what the Catholic bishops of this country are doing in terms of trying to sensitize the population to some very basic human rights issues, in particular, of course, the abortion issue, but also the nuclear war issue as well. It seems to me, and I think Bishop Schulte has already said, that the bishops are not telling people how to vote or for whom to vote. What they are trying to do is they are trying to sensitize the population at large with regard to some very basic human rights, moral type issues. And I think the fact that abortion, nuclear war, and the like have become issues in the campaign is a healthy thing. I think that the most fundamental concepts of human life and human dignity are now being addressed. They're being addressed perhaps in a rather loud way from time to time, but I think it's better that they be addressed than that they not be.
Mm-hmm. There is another consideration too, Father, that I think needs to be addressed here. I think for a number of years we have seen, and more people are becoming aware of it, a progressive secularization of the public area, the public forum, as to such an extent that there are those who are saying that this is the way it should be. This is the American way. That religion is, moral, spiritual values are totally a matter of one's private belief and should never intrude upon the public square. Mm-hmm. And I think this is what many people in our American society are beginning to question, because they're looking back at our history and they're seeing the profoundly spiritual, religious roots out of which this country came. After all, in our birth statement of the Declaration of Independence, the Founding Fathers said it was the Creator who endowed us with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, was that to be dismissed as a sectarian religious statement? It's at the very basis of our nation. I think more and more people are calling that secularizing tendency into question, and those who would want to secularize are concerned about that, and they feel maybe we better stop this as quickly as we can and keep telling them this is a secularistic state and keep any religious and moral values out of the public discourse.
Well then, to what level should a politician vote according to his moral or personal beliefs?
Well, Father, I saw a very interesting piece in the New York Times yesterday, which in fact was a rather lengthy quotation of Sir Edmund Burke, a British statesman, of course, back in the 1800s. The piece appeared basically because Burke is quoted as saying that his conscience has to rule him and must be abided by him rather than simply his constituency if and when a basic moral issue arises. I don't believe that a person can be true to his own very basic personal beliefs in a private way. I think that they may be his personal beliefs. I don't think that they ought to be his private beliefs. I think those beliefs have to be aired and made public. And I think that that is what is happening today. You cannot separate your private belief from your public posture. And I believe that that's what much of the debate, or at least one aspect of this debate, is about.
And that's true with respect to both elected officials and voters, that they must be true to their conscience. And that's precisely, it seems to me, what the bishops are addressing, that private conscience.
Very quickly, gentlemen, we have some politicians who state that they are going to vote the mind of their constituency. Is there a place for that in our political system?
I think we have a representative form of government, and the elected officials should be in touch with those whom they represent. But if the mind of the constituency goes contrary to certain human rights, well, the elected official obviously is not supposed to be voting the mind of the constituency. Nor do we necessarily wait until we get a general consensus. If we waited till we got a general consensus, we might still have slavery in the United States. If we waited for a general consensus, we might still have separate but equal education in the United States. So the elected representative cannot just be a slave to the whims of fashion, but has to make those judgments in terms of human rights considerations.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Stay with us now.
We hope that this evening's program has given you a better understanding of the issue of religion and politics. It's a complex issue, and one that we'll all be hearing about for quite some time to come.
But regardless of what you hear or what opinion you may hold, remember that your chance to be heard comes next week with the election. So get out and vote.
But before it's time to vote, you'll be seeing us again. Please join us next week for Reel to Reel. Good night.
Good night. And remember, Jesus is Lord.